Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Pair Program. I'm your host, Tim Winkler, joined by my co-host, Mike Gruen. Mike, how's it going today?
It's going great. How you doing?
I'm good. Do you know what today is?
No.
No. It's National Wine Day today.
That explains it.
So,
I'm not a big wine fan.
Not a wine guy?
Not a wine guy. No, it's funny because when I was in my 20s, I was much more of a wine guy, and I think that's a little unusual. I think more people get into wine as they get older. But in my 20s, actually, that was like one of the first trips my wife and I did. We went through Northern Virginia to a bunch of wineries and had a lot of fun. But yeah, for whatever reason, I've sort of, my tastes have changed, and now I'm more of a whiskey guy than a wine guy.
There you go. Well, yeah, there's plenty of wineries out this way, and in honor, I will be toasting with a little Albarino for the episode. So let's give our listeners a little bit of a preview of today's episode. So today we are going to be kind of unpacking this art of serial entrepreneurship, and we've got two excellent guests with us. Both are seasoned serial entrepreneurs who have started multiple startups. They've experienced successful exits. I would guess maybe some failures also along the way, but I'm pretty jazzed to hear their unique journeys and shed some light on what it takes to kind of launch multiple ventures. So for our guest, we've got Ryan Rowe, a 3-time founder. He has over a decade of experience designing, developing innovative technology. Ryan started as a designer, obsessed with creating the best user experience. He launched and sold his first startup, Kimono Labs, to Palantir, and is now co-founder and CTO of Archive, a resale technology startup based in San Francisco. We paired Ryan up today with Adam Meghji. I might have butchered that last name, so you can correct me if I did. Another repeat founder, who turned his love from computers into entrepreneurship. Adam sold his first startup, Universe, to Ticketmaster, and is now focused on authenticating and selling pieces of contemporary artwork with his current startup, Meghji. And a fun fact I found out in my intro call with Adam is that he is also a DJ and a musician. So that's pretty sweet. Maybe he'll rip some tracks with us here during the episode. And it's no surprise, man, that you are creating and building with that type of background deep rooted in your DNA. So guys, thanks both for joining us on the Pair Program today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right. So before we dive into the discussion, we do like to kick things off with a segment called Pair Me Up. This is a segment where we go around the room. We'll kind of spitball a couple of, oh boy, let's see, first time producing here. So what happens when a producer leaves.
Just on vacation.
Just on vacation. Yeah, we'll go around the room. Shout out a complimentary pairing. Mike, you kick us off. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I had a completely different pairing until we tried to get this episode going. So I'm calling an audible. My pairing is going to be troubleshooting and divide and conquer. I found that divide and conquer is always the best way to troubleshoot any type of problem. Split whatever you have in half. It's like one of the first things I learned in computer science, and like whether it's recursion or whatever, you just keep cutting the problem into smaller and smaller problems until whatever. And so, for those that can't figure it out.
What problems?
What problems? Yeah, we have no technical problems trying to get on today. So yeah, but yeah, definitely divide and conquer and troubleshooting.
Yeah, I dig that. At least it's not as bad as the first time I actually tried to produce. This was before we had our producer. I forgot to push record for the first 10 minutes. So everybody had to kind of just stage talk what they had just said for the last 10 minutes. It was pretty embarrassing. But cool. All right, I'll jump in. So my pairing is going to be Tim Winkler and sunburns. And I did just refer to myself in the third person. But it's inevitable. Summer is kind of upon us, so spending more time outdoors, and as a result, I'm pretty quickly reminded of how pale and sensitive my skin is to sunlight. So just out this past weekend and just doing some work in the yard. I felt like it wasn't more than an hour, cleaning some gutters and wearing a tank top, and come back in and I'm pretty much burnt to a crisp. So it's that time of year where I'm lathering up on SPF 90. We're headed to the lake this weekend, and so I'm pretty confident that it always ends in a sunburn. But no matter how prepared I am, so that's my pairing. I'll pass it over to our guest now. Ryan, why don't you give us a quick intro and tell us your pairing?
Yeah, totally. I find it very hard to believe, Tim, that that's your favorite pairing.
I mean, we've
But
been this a while.
we'll take it.
Yeah.
We'll take it. So I'm Ryan Rowe, co-founder and CTO of Archive. Tell you more about that later. For my favorite pairing today, I guess I'd say surfing and warm water. So I live in LA. I love to surf. I live right next to the beach, but every once in a while I go on vacation and I get to do it in 85-degree water, and it's absolute joy. And I look forward to that every time I do it. And it's just an incredible experience. So putting those two together is my favorite, better than being sunburned.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It always happens.
Yeah, that's true. I actually could have gone with sunburn and aloe vera. That could have been the favorite pairing. But
Relief.
combo.
yeah, on the surfing. So do you wear a wetsuit out there? Or?
No, I mean, I do here. And
Yeah.
that's part of the joy, it's not just being warm in the water, but you're like totally free in board shorts. You're kind of just jumping in the ocean. It's so good.
That's all. Did you grow up surfing?
No, I didn't start till college. I went to UCLA, so that's where I kind of started getting in the water, and then now it's been about 20 years. And
I hear people refer to it as almost like therapeutic or like a form of meditation. Do you find that when you're out there in the ocean?
Yeah, I mean, you can do it for hours, and especially if it's warm water, another benefit.
Right.
If you're freezing your ass off, it's not a situation. You're kind of in and you're out. But it is, I think, like looking back at especially if you're in somewhere tropical, beautiful, you've got like the mountains, the jungle, you're kind of looking at it from the ocean is a really unique vantage point. And it really feels like you're in nature in this kind of unique way. And you can do it for hours, and it is meditative because of that.
Yeah. I do a bit of snowboarding. I feel some similar kind of feels when I'm out there on the mountain.
Totally.
It's certainly therapeutic. Cool. Well, we're pumped to have you on. And then we've got Adam. Adam, good to have you on. And you want to give us a quick intro and your pairing?
Thank you. Yeah, stoked to be here. I'm Adam Meghji, co-founder and CTO of Peggy, which I'm sure we'll talk a lot about later. Lifelong hacker and entrepreneur, developer, and many other things, father, DJ, etc. My pairing is music and coding, which I think, to many might seem like sort of an obvious pairing, right? Like it's no secret that programmers, developers, we all love to put our headphones on and code, right? But then I think for me, I also like my experience as a musician, as a DJ, I think like when I relate to music, it's also from like the creator perspective. And same with coding, right? And these two pursuits I've been intoxicated by them like my whole life. Like I grew up playing piano, which I sucked at, played guitar, also sucked at that, and then DJing was like really what clicked, right? And this is like decades ago, but I've just been DJing and a music producer, more than half my life now. And also coding, the whole time too. And I love putting the headphones on, running long mixes on YouTube and just like getting into that zone. Now, as a CTO these days, I'm finding like, less and less time to get into the zone because I'm interrupted with meetings and other important things too. I still hack on personal things as well, but certainly like listening to music. But then also, when I'm done working, when I'm done coding, when the baby's asleep, I come back in my office here and I'll fire up the other laptop and I'll fire up audio software, or sometimes not even software. I'll just fire up the hardware, and I'll just get loose on like making music and just decompressing. And so, the two things for me kind of they co-inhabit the same parts of my brain. And I think they both bring me like the outcomes bring me deep joy. And and they sort of have this like complementary effect. I think they may use similar parts of my brain. It's hard to unpack them because they seem sort of foreign, but they are complementary. So
I totally agree. It's actually just this week I had a one-on-one, or maybe it was last Friday, with one of the guys who reports to me, who's also a musician. We were talking about this for a long time, and I've had that theory of not just the listening to music, but musicians and the correlation between them and being good software engineers. And over the years, all the way back to my first job, where one of my coworkers was an amazing musician, and all the way up, just every job, there's always a handful of really amazing engineers who are also amazing musicians. And I think there is something there that correlates. I think it's the creativity. I think there's something to music itself that's like this esoteric language, but it's really logical at the same time and really mathematical. I think there's just a lot there. I've noticed that so much over my career, so I love that
Yeah,
pairing.
that's spot on. Agreed. And with rock climbing, bouldering, that's another common pairing. It's like bouldering and like developers. Like my co-founder Craig, a while ago we would trying to be sourcing IRL developers, in our city in Toronto. And typically he would meet people at the climbing gym, or he would find out the climbing, he would take them there. And part of the like developer hiring, the wooing process sometimes involved like rock climbing with people.
Cool.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty compelling, way to meet and get to know the CEO, right? So that's another pro tip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also skiing. I've seen a lot of engineers, founders, folks in venture too. I went out for a ski trip out in Utah with a crew of folks from Austin, from the Austin startup scene. And next thing you know, there's folks meeting up from, the SF scene, like everybody's there. And there's probably like 25, 30, tech engineers, founders, like all kind of getting after it on the mountain. Something about that's seems synonymous.
My co-founder and I both spent the first 2 winters of our company in Utah.
Oh, did you?
For skiing.
So, good stuff.
Yeah,
good stuff.
Totally get it.
Cool.
What resort?
We were staying in Salt Lake. We had a house in Salt Lake, and we were just kind of 20 minutes up from Alta Snowbird, so we spent most of our time there. Yeah,
it's beautiful. Cool. All right. I like it. I think that's a good wrap on the first segment. So we're gonna jump into the heart of the discussion at this point. And like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about serial entrepreneurs, looking to kind of uncover what it is that makes these guys tick, and want to continue to pursue this lifestyle of pure chaos. Jokingly, but sort of joking, because we talk to a lot of founders and tech leaders and entrepreneurs on the pod, and it's no secret that the lifestyle of an entrepreneur can be stressful, a lot of ups and downs, mood swings. And so what is it that keeps these types of individuals so hooked and continuing to come back? So we'll hear the breakdown of the guests, each of their kind of entrepreneurial journey. We'll talk a little bit about like risk taking, learning from failure, the required mindset that it takes, and a lot more. But with that, I want to start with you, Ryan, and this topic actually was your idea. You recommended serial entrepreneurship and why you keep finding yourself, starting companies. So I'll start with you and have you kind of provide our listeners with some context on your journey. So maybe try to keep it 3 to 5 minutes on the breakdown of your journey, and then I'll ask the same from you, Adam, and then we can kind of riff from there.
Cool. Thanks, Tim. Yeah. So I think it is, to your point, a little bit of a disease. It's one of these things that is going to cause you stress and pain and have its ups and its downs, but there's just something, I feel like, once you've experienced it once, and once you've kind of seen that play out, it becomes the way that you, manifest professionally. And for a lot of us, and this may be true for you too, Adam, going between, back and forth from entrepreneurship to being an employee at a larger company, you find that there are things that are just somewhat intolerable about the frameworks of the larger companies. And I know that's most entrepreneurs will tell you that, but I think everybody's experience of that is different, and the reasons for that are different. So I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I guess even before starting my career, I went straight from an undergrad degree in math to a PhD program in math, because I didn't want a job. I didn't want to think about going to career fairs. It just made sense to me to keep doing what I was doing in undergrad. And when I got to grad school, which was at Columbia in New York, I very quickly learned that the path was very much narrowing. The set of things you can do with a math PhD is quite small. And I did not want to be a math professor. I very clearly kind of started to see that. And I also just didn't want to work a job where I was using those skills just because of like how arcane it is. Like the number of people I could impact with what I was doing was so small, and that was so sad to me. My professor told me he was really excited about our research findings because there was this one other research group on Earth that would use them. And that moment was when I decided I'm out of here. And so I discovered kind of user experience design totally by luck. There was a class at Columbia that I took on the topic, became infatuated with it, and found myself at a company called Frog Design. And so I stayed there for 7 years, half of that in New York and half of that in Shanghai, China. And I had this incredible experience learning about tons of different industries and effectively going through what looks like an entrepreneurial journey, but like very much with guardrails. Because every time we engaged with a client, you had to sort of do the need finding, talking to customers, figuring out what to build, then develop a concept, and then figure out how to bring it to market. But it always ended right there. And it was like very, very frustrating to me that we would hand these presentations of this is how you build this business off, and they would get kind of mangled, and the company would never actually do the thing in the way that we envisioned it. And so that's why at the end of 7 years, I was like, I'm going to try this on my own. I really think I can do this, and I want to see what it's like to actually put a product in the world and iterate on it. Like even before doing that, my first, I wouldn't call this entrepreneurial pursuit, but when the App Store first launched in 2008, I built an app called Tipstar, which was actually one of the first tip calculators in the App Store, and it was wildly popular. And it literally had like hundreds of thousands of users. And it was free. I made no money off of it ever, but it was just me putting something in the world and having, not that this is much impact, but like actually having people calculate their tips using your app. It was a really good feeling. And it made me realize like I can maybe go do something that is a business. And that's when I started my first business in 2014 called Kimono. We were building a web scraper that was very usable by kind of anyone. So it was to try to lower the bar for that type of activity. We went through this kind of insane experience. We flew to California. We went through Y Combinator. We raised a ton of money, knowing absolutely nothing about what we were doing. We got an acquisition offer from Google within 2 weeks of launching. Like it was literally an episode or a season of Silicon Valley. We experienced it all, and it all culminated in an acquisition by Palantir, which uh, was very bittersweet. And we'll probably talk about what that looks like later because we might have a topic on that later. And since then, I've kind of been working on many different ideas because I think the thing I learned through that first process is that really you have to care about the thing that you are building. That first product I was building at Kimono, I was excited about it, but it didn't matter to me whether or not it existed. So I didn't get me up in the morning. And so my latest company that I founded with somebody that I met who had already been kind of thinking about this idea called Archive, we're working on a problem that actually has a climate impact focus and mission. And that's I found has been a truly different experience because every day I'm motivated by ultimately what we will be able to achieve with it. And as a result, the company is going a lot better than the past companies that I've started. And I think there's just this sort of cohesion between how I feel about it, how my co-founder feels about it, the mission we're going after. And it's okay that it's a journey that's going to take years, and we're not in a sprint. It's a marathon, and it's been a really great experience. So I'll leave it there, and we can talk more about the rest later.
Yeah, that's awesome. Couple of quick hit questions, and then we'll pass it over to Adam. But how long were you running Kimono before it was acquired?
2 years.
2 years. Wow, that's quick.
Yeah. Very quick.
And then how long have you been running Archive?
Archive's been 2.5 years at this point. So
and some
already
quick hits
past that. Yeah.
So quick hits. Funded. How many in headcount?
Yeah, so Archive, so we started it kind of during the pandemic, 2020, end of summer. Great time to start a company because you've got a lot of time and a lot of space to kind of think. We're now, we've raised about $25 million across a few rounds. We've got 35 people. We're distributed all over the US. We work with 40 different fashion brands in 7 different countries, helping them build secondhand marketplaces. So we'll work with a brand like the North Face, and users can go to the North Face Renewed and buy used products, and we power everything about that program. So the site that the users are going to, but also all of the like warehouse and inventory management software and everything you'd need to run that as a business.
Oh, creative, really neat. Cool. I've got a lot that we can dissect from there, but let's transition to Adam. Adam, why don't you give the listeners a little bit of context and share your journey?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for the opportunity. As I mentioned before, lifelong hacker, developer, entrepreneur. And, this really goes back to like my origin story started when I was whatever, are you 8 years old in grade 4, I think? So I think I was grade 4. This is like circa like 89 or 90. My dad comes home, he throws an Amiga on the floor. And so I had never really like, I was kind of the nerdy kid. When all the kids in my neighborhood like played hockey and were like cool and this and that, I was like kind of the nerdy bookworm. And computers weren't really a thing then, so I felt lost as a kid, and like I'd always be picked last in sports and all these things, right? And I was creative in that, but that wasn't super celebrated in the 80s like maybe it is now. So I think when I came across that computer, something magical happened. I was just curious, like, what is this thing? And then I booted it up and then broke it, and then every week or two I would have like mangled the hard. I would have formatted it, not even knowing what I'm doing, and just clicking wildly. And then my dad was a good sport. He would take it back to the warranty, get it wiped, like brought back fresh, and then I'd go reinstall everything. So, I was just like a kid tinkering. And that was sort of the obsession. It was like, it just felt like endless Lego that I could just continue to play with and build with, which is, I think, a feeling that many of us can relate to. I think one of my earliest like programming memories was when, I was supposed to be studying, because I'm from Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. We learned French growing up. So I was supposed to be learning my French conjugations of all my verbs, past, present, future. It gets quite boring, and typically it's just you write them out and then you like make your own flashcards. So typically you make your own flashcards, but I'm sitting there with this computer in front of me, and I'm like in grade 4 or something, and I want to do anything but flashcards. So I'm like, okay, well, let's just try and use like Amiga Basic. So my first program was just like a way for me to read in, the answer, and then it would prompt me and I type it in. And if it matched, then, I get a point. And if it doesn't, then I lose a point. So I just made it. It was more interesting to make a game about learning French than it was to actually learn French. I eventually learned French, but I continued to learn programming even more. And so, yeah, that's kind of like a memory I haven't really shared too much, but that was certainly like an early, maybe the first like aha moment when I was like, hey, I'm scratching my own itch here. Now, of course, there's no real distribution for that. I didn't turn that into a startup idea. Probably just deleted the source and rebuilt it and refactored it later. But then a couple years later, I'm running a BBS. A couple years later, I'm in high school. I'm starting to like branch out beyond that. Internet became a thing. And then I guess like in the double O's was when I started, let's say, founding things. I was doing internships and co-op and all that at the time, and was in school for computer science, but I was more fascinated by, using these programming like things. This is in the like PHP days, right? Like early PHP days. I'm able to use PHP to create websites, like dynamic websites for my friends who are artists, creatives who don't have a home on the internet. Like this is in the early double O's, right? I had to get them set up with like Hotmail addresses, even just to get online. So I'd be like, hey, email me your like, whatever, email me like just pictures of your art, or your like, email me your rap or whatever, right? But then they'd be like, I don't have an email, I can't attach a file. Like, what are you talking about? So I'd have to like get them set up. And yes, then I could eventually, onboard. So I was helping on-ramp people on the internet, and then, and then helping give them a home before they could self-publish. And so I made a community with some of my best friends. We also would DJ, just a bunch of creative kids. And one of them was a nerd. And so we all kind of like went online and were on the forums and things. So that was like a really fun way for me to sort of scratch an itch for my sort of creative friends and my creative self. And then, fast forward, when I was getting my career started after school, after university, I was working at startups and building like web apps, and then eventually, APIs and mobile apps and platform things. Started getting the reps in just on building, web apps, mobile apps, APIs, everything full stack, right? And also trying to do all of the sort of necessary skills along the way, like whether that involved like, doing some design, right? Doing some customer success, doing implementations, helping on sales engineering, maybe even pitching potential customers, right? And trying to do all those things to get like a more well-rounded experience than just like letting the PHP code speak for itself. And after working like in small startups, working alongside the founding team, typically, eventually kind of felt like, hey, maybe the next frontier is for me to sit on the other side of the desk, and maybe be exposed to some of the things that maybe you're insulated from when you're a developer or an employee. Like you're not necessarily aware of what the burn rate is, or what the fundraise situation is, or all the other surprises that may get sprung on the founding team that like sometimes you insulate others from, right? You want to give them a nice, safe, secure environment where they can do their best work and not agonize over the things that maybe we agonize as founders. So, but I wanted that pain for some reason, and so I think I thought at first that it would like bring me freedom, but then quickly realized, yes, it's one of those things. I quit my 9 to 5 to work like 24/7, or something similar, right? So, but I wouldn't trade it for the world, and definitely like being in the founder seat has allowed me to, like 10x my creativity, because I'm able to be exposed to all of the problems, engineering, business, and otherwise, and then try and map solutions to them, technical, but also business, and just various, like you just see the full spectrum of problems, right? And so, yeah, I think that's been a rewarding thing for me. I can't really imagine myself doing something other than being a startup CTO. Even though if you catch me sort of in the trough of sorrow in a new venture, I may, lament that. I'm like, oh, like I could have done like, this is just, what is like, this is just irrational that I would subject myself to this, uncertainty and blah, blah, blah. Maybe we're bootstrapping it. And like, I'm trying to get some code going so I can try and, I don't know, eventually take a salary or something. It's just like many moments of just feeling like this is just nuts, right? But certainly it's worthwhile. And in my journey, so in 2011, I founded a company called Universe, which was at first Universe with 2 I's, and then eventually universe.com, got the domain. And found some product market fit there. Grew an event ticketing platform, kind of like an Eventbrite, a self-serve ticketing platform. We did a couple key technical innovations that were unique to the industry. We made a third-party JavaScript widget that let you sell tickets anywhere, not just on our own web property, but on your own, WordPress site or your own website. And that was like a key innovation that caught the eye of Ticketmaster. And fast forward, that culminated in an acquisition. And then I was a VP tech over there, helping bring some of the technology over, like post acquisition, but then also bringing startup thinking to a 40-year-old tech company, and like helping encourage some of the practices that we that are commonplace in a startup environment, but not necessarily you might take they might not exist in a 40-year-old company, right? Like just sending a pull request isn't something that you can necessarily do until you culturally make that a thing. And after Universe, after the Ticketmaster, well, even at the Ticketmaster, in that was a really wonderful phase of my career, and I really enjoyed it. Made a lot of friends, shipped a lot of cool stuff, wrote a patent, eventually became like the blockchain guy for Live Nation. I also did a stint partway through where I was the fractional CTO of a crypto company and built a wallet and some blockchain infrastructure that was eventually acquired by Voyager Digital, who is now famous in the crypto world, sadly, but hey, you never know. And then my latest venture is Meghji, which we can talk more about, but doing it all over again. My same co-founder Craig Follett and we started Universe in 2011, and we started Meghji in 2020, and we spent 10 years building a marketplace for event tickets, and now we're building a social marketplace for art. And so we're able to take some of those experiences and learnings and wonderful co-founder patterns that we've developed together over the years, that muscle memory, and then bring it to a new industry, art, which is very analog and old school and ripe for disruption, but nobody's really approached it, in the right manner. You can't just apply e-commerce playbooks to it. You can't just do what other people have done to digitize that industry. It's special. And so we've created something. We have a special play that we are very excited about, and hope that this is our big one, and excited to see where it lands.
Cool. Wow. It's an awesome story, and what I love to pull out of something that came from both of you is this most recent startup. This is both like passion projects merged with building something new, and so I just think I think that's fascinating because this is your second or third go at this, and it's like I'm going to be real intentional with this next go around versus falling into something, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted
Mike,
to something Ryan had said about the first startup, and then this one being something this passionate thing. One of the things I've noticed, I've worked at startups throughout all my career, and it's interesting to see the passion of the founders in the beginning, and then there's this period of time. Frequently, it's after like the Series C or D, like once the board really starts getting involved and putting their fingers into like the direction, I feel like that's when even you can sort of almost feel it in the founders, like it's not there, or when that second, like I'm just curious, like is that just my experience, or do you think that that's a fairly common thing?
I mean, I can't speak because I haven't gotten that far. Series B, Series C. My first startup was acquired pre-Series A, and then now we're
Good for
at
you.
Series A stage. So I wonder that may be the reason. It may be other reasons. Like you get to a point where it could be that you're obsessed with the 0 to 1, and one of the things that kind of shocked me throughout your story, Adam, is just like how similar we are in our backgrounds and our interests and the things that, I built websites for friends. I built like PHP web apps because it was fun to solve problems with a new technology. All the things that you said at some point in my, I built actually a game to help me learn Chinese because I was
There you go, right?
learning Chinese. I do think there's like a class of founder that I put myself in this class, which is sort of, what I would call the builder. I just love making things. And I think part of what may be happening at that Series C, whatever stage of company, is that you're no longer making things. I mean, even at the stage we're at today, I'm not really making things in the same way I was a couple of years ago, but I'm making it by extension because we are still very much autonomously running. We're still very much like going into new product areas, new business areas all the time. And my creative brain is like constantly still firing like it needs to be. But I think you get to a point where you're so sufficiently like you've figured out how to build this business, and the things you have to do completely change. And I'm not saying that I anticipate, oh yeah, I will definitely be ready to leave when we hit that stage, because I don't know what it will look like or when it will happen, but that's my sense.
Yeah, and I think that there's like having worked with a number of places where right there comes that point where the founder themselves is like, hey, I'm going to bring in somebody who actually knows to. I did 0 to 50 or 0 to 60 or whatever it is, right? But like, if we really want to scale this out, there's somebody better than me for this, and and now it's a business. It's not the same thing. And so it's interesting. But I think you're right that there's probably some sort of mentality thing there. I haven't. There are definitely some who can do both, who can do that early and then also switch gears and go into that other growth stage. So wish you
Yeah.
luck.
And I think it's less, about like whether or not you can, and more about whether or not you want,
Well,
want to, or
when it comes to
enjoy
can,
that work.
it's always a choice, right? You
Yeah.
can't. It's right. What do you want to do? It's a choice. I totally agree with
Because
that.
even in this experience, I think this is one of the things that went terribly wrong with my first startup, was that never really made a transition. I operated in the same kind of plane of existence the entire 2 years until acquisition, where I was still just like a builder. I had a team of people around me, but I wasn't really leading them to success. The company was not growing in a sustainable, smart way to actually scale my co-founder and I. Whereas what I've noticed by very stark contrast in my most recent journey with Archive is my job fundamentally changes every 3 to 6 months, and I'm doing like a completely different set of activities. And that in and of itself is like a creative learning process, which is exciting. But when I find parts of the job that I have now moved into that I don't like, I hire someone to do that job. And then I find a way to, now I'm oriented and I'm doing the things that are exciting and interesting to me. Maybe someday that dries up. I don't know, but that's been my experience.
So when you got acquired, how long were you at Palantir?
About 2 years, almost to the day.
Oof. And when did it strike you that this wasn't like the long haul for you? Was it pretty immediate, pretty quick, or did it take you a little time?
To be honest, the immediate reaction was like absolute like bliss and relief. Not because the exit was great, but just because I no longer am literally so stressed I want to die. Like I don't like nothing. I almost had this feeling like nothing matters. This is amazing. Like, of course, I'm going to try to do a good job, but it's not on me to make sure it doesn't fail, which was like so different and so relieving that I actually just enjoyed myself for like a year. I was also traveling all over the world, living in different countries. I met my now wife. Like it was a great.
That's awesome.
But then I think, between 12 and 18 months in, it started to hit me that, I started to get deeper into like the role I was playing there, which I was doing sort of an early product. I was kind of trying to figure out what should Palantir be building in the commercial space and putting definition on that. And when I realized that I couldn't run it like it was my startup, like there was actually a board and a leadership team that I had to now convince to do these things. And that was not I don't like convincing people to do things. I like doing them. That's when I started to realize like this isn't going to work long term, because I there's too much of a disconnect between the machine that actually steers the company and what I'm bringing to the table. And that's what I needed to get back to.
Sure. And then Adam, you were with Ticketmaster for some time. I was looking at your profile.
Yeah.
So that was a really, and I think that's always an interesting contrast. How many years were you there for at that point, after
I want to
acquisition?
say like four or 5 years. Yeah. And Ryan, I think it's interesting because, I really enjoyed my time at Ticketmaster, and I probably would have left like just after the earnout, and then started something a lot sooner. Except what I was able to do is I was able to carve out, like I was able to acknowledge that, yes, I also, like you, I thrive in environments where I'm able to be creative and I can direct that energy towards like building and let the results speak for themselves rather than persuasion. And like, I'd rather be in the editor. Like I'd rather be in Vim than in like making a deck, and I was able to find a home within like a huge company that was, a couple of roles that were more like IC roles, but still like quite senior and influential. So I was able to do things like just help like prove out like architectural directions for the company, whether it was like in blockchain or other like real-time offline sync type use cases, and wrote a patent and stuff like that. But also just like helping build developer culture, speed things up. Sometimes I'd jump in, I'd whip up a microservice like we had a need. I wrote the OAuth service for Ticketmaster. Like there was no OAuth service, and that was a capability that, if it existed, unlocked a whole ton of use cases. So yeah, it's like rather than making decks about why you might want to create an OAuth service and embrace open source practices within the org, it's like, here is the repo, I've deployed it, try it, and then it like caught on, right? So that's kind of my approach. And yeah, I think because that company, I was lucky enough to have been acquired by a company that nurtured that, and also like, shout out the leaders there. Like it was the people there, that leadership team, that nurtured that within the startup company. They wanted to protect that, like, protect the startup energy of the folks that they acquired. I have friends that have sold their companies to similarly sized, 10-20 billion dollar acquirers, right? And they end up, they acquire, but then the merger aspect of it like snuffs out all innovation and all Like the soul that drives founders and entrepreneurial and creative folks to make something 0 to 1, like it totally just gets drowned out by bureaucracy and process. And then guess what? Then those people get beaten down, their ideas aren't embraced or fertilized, and then yeah, they churn, right? And other folks, who maybe thrive in that environment take their place. But it's just sad because you acquire like a smart company with tech and brilliant founders and leaders and self-starters who can work autonomously, and you have to give them like the right ingredients and the right environment to thrive as part of the merger process. Otherwise you are not actuating a lot of that value. So yeah, I stuck around because it was like a wonderful place for me to like apply my ideas, and then that's why I chose to continue to grow there.
I think you're the first musician I've ever heard say anything nice about Ticketmaster.
What would you say, so as far as Adam, you had a repeat co-founder, which I think is interesting. It probably de-risked a lot of your going into a second venture. You probably felt very comfortable. That's one of the biggest challenges I've heard is finding a good co-founder that you can mesh well with. Was that similar with your situation, Ryan? Did you work with your current co-founder previously, or how did you link up with
No,
them?
actually, that is a part of your story, Adam, that I was going to comment on, because my experience is very different from yours. Not that I had a terrible time with my first co-founder. He's actually one of my best friends, and we learned a lot about each other and a lot about working together throughout the process. But I think what we both realized at the end is being great friends doesn't translate to being great co-founders for a ton of reasons. And I think I'm in a much better place with my co-founder relationship that I have now, and it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that she was not previously my friend, but it's just the way that we complement each other, the way that we work together, the way we make decisions, the way it's completely perfect for our situation and the company that we're building. And I honestly think it was luck. Like we met each other under very kind of random and serendipitous circumstances. When I left Palantir, I started another company and ended up shutting that company down after about a year. I won't get into that whole story at the moment, but I was kind of in flux. Like I was trying to figure out what to do. Also, the pandemic was raging. It was lockdown. There was like kind of nothing to do. I was doing a little bit of contracting, but I was really just trying to figure out what do I want to work on. And I read this book called Let My People Go Surfing by the founder of Patagonia, which actually doesn't have anything to do with surfing. It has to do with the company culture of Patagonia, the story of founding the company, and ultimately about the climate impact of the fashion industry and the sort of sort of behavioral problem that the world has about buying new things, not using them enough and throwing them away, putting them into landfill or storing them in your basement or whatever it is you do with them when you're done with them. And how are we going to, this existential crisis we're facing. And I was thinking, my mind was racing about all this stuff when I met Emily, who had just spent 2 years in her MBA program at Stanford exploring fashion resale because she cared about the climate impact of the apparel industry. This is the rant.
Wow.
We met each other and she told me this and I was like, I just read this book. This is so weird. We started talking and it was just very clear immediately that we had a chemistry, mutual respect, and that we could go build something together. So I think you can find your co-founder anywhere. I do think the relationship is critically important. It's very easy to get wrong. And the way you complement each other is a huge, huge part of that.
Adam, you had an interesting, I thought it was interesting how your co-founder, how you two first met. You just messaged you on LinkedIn or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is so odd because especially when Craig and I met, right? I had not founded a company yet. I mean, not formally. Maybe I had, but the stuff that Universe was our first serious company where we raised money and it was a big deal. So but I was a developer and, he messaged me, and as a developer, you get tons of inbound spam from recruiters and
recruiters.
Yeah. Like as soon as you get your email, yeah. as soon as your email gets on like a GitHub or something, like I was just getting a lot of like unsolicited like blowing up phones and emails and this and that. But I got a message on LinkedIn from Ben and Craig. I had a third co-founder then as well, Ben. So yeah, I got a message from them, and something about it it was just a very like the authenticity and like the genuine tone and the humanity sort of behind the email, like it resonated with me, and it didn't seem like, it felt like this is a like there's a smart guy behind this email, and I'm curious to know like the way that it hit different. So yeah, we got together. We're jamming on some ideas that they had and I had, and I had already started on this sort of like food delivery, sort of UberX for food type idea. And I was jamming on that. I had some Rails code written and very basic design. Probably wasn't going to go anywhere, but I actually had high conviction on the idea. And when I met my co-founders, they were already sort of thinking like on a bigger scale, very similar, but not just about food, but about many more things. And I thought, hey, you know what? Like, I'm probably not going to make it if I just go at this alone, let alone when it comes to all the fundraising and all the amazing things that they had in their network. And so, yeah, fast forward, and that was the right call because yes, the co-founder skills and attitudes and everything were all very, very compatible. And yeah, we wouldn't have been able to do it without each other, and it worked out. And yeah, Craig and I are now on our second venture. Craig and I have a wonderful sort of, we like to think of it like a yin and yang, where he actually did go to school for software engineering, and he had like a dual major software engineering. He went to a prestigious business school in Ontario, and I went through computer science, but I had been noodling on like ventures and lemonade stands my whole life, right? And just have that sort of like entrepreneurial influence, I think, from my parents and my family. So the yin yang, it's like you've got primarily like a developer with a business sense, and you have primarily like a business and networks and fundraising guy with like the empathy of a former software engineer. So he could shoulder surf my SQL query and try and pick out a bug, and I could shoulder surf his Excel financial model and I'd pick out a bug, and and then we'd go and eat food together and all these things and like hang out. And so yeah, like I think having that compatibility both from the hard skills, the technical skills, but also just like he was in my wedding party when I got married, and had a lot of good times over the years, like countless good times. So it's his birthday tomorrow. And so just having that like affinity for each other, and he's like a brother. So he's a special co-founder to me. And yeah, like feel like with that, we could pivot the business like 180 into something totally random, and we would find a way to make it work.
Cool. Yeah, you mentioned that was something that maybe your parents were also, a little entrepreneurial. Ryan, is that similar in your, family as well?
My mom is an entrepreneur. She started her own software company, writing software for foundations to manage grants. So charity, like, the Packard Foundation. So the Hewlett Packard family has a bunch of money. They're giving it away. They need software to manage all that. And she wrote that software. So I kind of grew up around, at least my dad worked in tech, but not as an entrepreneur, but like just seeing that that's a thing that probably has a lot to do with sort of the confidence I felt to do it. I feel like people often think of entrepreneurs as like risk takers or, highly risk tolerant people. And I remember reflecting on this even back in 2013 when I was leaving my job, my first time I'm leaving a full-time job to go start a company. And I don't remember it feeling like a risk to me. I remember actually thinking, this field doesn't feel risky at all. Like this feels very on rails, and it feels like the best way for me to move my career forward. And so I think it probably was trained because my family was fine. My mom was great, and like, I think that must have had something to do with it, even if it wasn't conscious.
Yeah, I always think it's an interesting, when we look to hire up folks that will adapt well into our environment, and we're, 17, 18 folks, I tend to look into folks that, that are comfortable with a little bit of chaos, that maybe they've been exposed to it from their parents at one point, kind of running, a small business, or just being entrepreneurial mindset. That's something that I think does translate down. For me, I didn't really have parents that were entrepreneurs, but I instead found a mentor that I came into contact with fresh out of school, who he had been living kind of this entrepreneurial lifestyle, like traveling in Southeast Asia, recruiting nurses and from Asia and bringing them into the States. And so he had been doing this on his own for about a year. So he was in a very different mindset. Then met up in a kind of a corporate environment, became really close, both kind of realized we were really good at our job. And he kept putting a bug in my ear of like, man, we could just do this on our own and subcontract to the company that we're working with. Why don't we go set something up out in Bali, Indonesia? So his big what he'd always preach is, just get out of your comfort zone, because it's very easy to get comfortable in a corporate gig, and there's nothing wrong with it. But if you feel like you're capable of something more, it's going to feel uncomfortable at first, and then the more you can get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That was kind of our theme. And so we split off and spent 2 years, but we kind of were able to tee up like a contract with our current employer to de-risk it and say, okay, give us 6 months of work, we'll go stand it up. And then we kind of knew that we were getting some sort of an hourly rate for the foreseeable future. But we did it for a couple of years. This was during the housing crisis, so it was near impossible to do business development from across the globe. So after 2 years, I came home and took a corporate job. And something that you kind of touched on, Ryan, was, I don't know, that transition for me was really uncomfortable, but in a bad way. Like I just felt like I had experienced so much that I was limiting myself to be in a cubicle, and just didn't really see where my work was, what it was producing. And so after about a year and a half, I quit and traveled for 6 months, cleared my head, and then came home and started this business, and never looked back. It's just been an ongoing kind of pursuit since then, and very stressful at times, which is one of the things I wanted to kind of bring up to you all, is because risk is something that you mentioned, but what is it that you think are these characteristics that some people mention grit, persistence? What is it that you think is what it kind of takes, or what's gotten you through some of those real lows of being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, Adam, I'm sure you have thoughts here. I never really thought of myself as like super high pain tolerance, grit kind of person. I mean, at least I'm not with physical pain, and I definitely don't love extremely high stress situations. I do tend to thrive in them, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily related. I think it comes back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier. I feel like it's the creativity that's like innate in a lot of founders, and it's the like desire to stay close to that creativity and keep making things and solving problems on a organizational wide level, that like at least that's what keeps me there in that place and keeps me coming back. Because it's just, there's something about the dynamic nature of it. It's like it's always something new. I have a friend who described startups or founding a startup to me as, you're in a room, the room has a pipe coming out of the ceiling, that pipe is literally pumping shit into the room, like a lot of shit into the room, and your job is to clean the room of the shit, and you have a thimble. And so and like this visual, like I just feel like there are obviously times when things are going well and it's fine and it's whatever, but there are times when I really can like viscerally feel like I'm in that room with that thimble, and it's just coming at you from all angles. And I think it's the satisfaction of getting through those moments and looking back at them and being like, holy shit, we navigated that. Like we navigated that. It was not a thing that like before this whole thing started, I could even confidently tell you that I would ever be able to do, but we did it and we figured it out. I think that's just like such a good and addicting feeling that
Mm-hmm.
you just stick with it.
I just had a very similar conversation with one of my colleagues about that. Like when you look back, like when I look back over my career, the moments that stand out were those hard times. And I know at the time I thought it sucked, but in retrospect, my brain has washed all of the suck out of that, like whitewashed it all. I have no real, like, all I remember is we got through it and it was a lot of fun and good times. And it also, that analogy of like the thimble and clearing out a river shit works so well for, because when I think about like what makes for a good co-founder, getting back a little bit to the co-founder discussion, is what I've seen are the people who can still manage to have enjoy those hard times together. Like you're looking for someone who, it doesn't matter how tough it is. Like you could be cleaning out a sewer system or pumping out a whatever, and you'll still manage to make it fun and laugh about it and just sort of in the moment. And it's not just like someone who's there whining, complaining, and just sapping all of your energy about how much this sucks. It's someone who somehow manages to, like, the two of you, it's just a chemistry thing. And you just
Yep.
sort of both
Mm-hmm.
lift each other up, and like it's, or the three of you or whatever that is. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
that analogy works so well, because that's what you want in a co-founder,
Yeah.
someone who's going to be like, hey, I'll take the thimble for a little bit.
Yeah. And it's almost like you have those moments where you sit there and you're like, it is actually insane how bad this is. Like
Right.
you're like almost able to like soberly exchange that moment with each other, and that is so critical.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for I think for me, like maybe my trait here that allows it to work for me is that like I'm really bad at quitting. I'm not a good quitter, which is a blessing and a curse, because I think it's a blessing. Like, you gotta like it. If you're one who is quick to quit things, then yeah, you'll look at the thimble and you'll look at the pipe and you won't even go in the room. Or maybe you'll, you'll like, put that thimble to work for a bit, but then eventually you'll quickly realize that, yeah, this is like horrible. What am I doing? And you'll move on, right? Whereas I will just like find it in myself to just keep going. And actually, I've sort of like noticed this in general. Like I don't know when, if I'm like trading whatever crypto or something, I don't set a stop loss. I'll buy something and I'll just hold it to zero. So like if it works out or if it doesn't work, I'll be at the finish line, whether I'm winning or losing. But I won't abandon halfway through. And so I think, like, because I have maybe a thick skin for that, or a thin skin for quitting, however you want to look at it. I think in the startup world as a founder, I think maybe that is like maybe a superpower of sorts, because there are times when it does seem like the reasonable thing to do is to move on, and you have to push through that, and in order to defy the odds, like, maybe, and then just keep trying and just keep innovating and going. And then, yeah, like then you stumble upon the thing that gets you product market fit, or gets you through that fundraise, or gets you through whatever your next hurdle is. And then, well, I mean, you were talking about skiing before, right? When you're on like the rope, you're waiting for the rope tow, right? And like they always have those like duct tape knots or something like on the rope. And so the rope is going through your gloves. You're not getting any traction. You're waiting, and all of a sudden, like your glove grabs that knot and just yanks you up the thing, right? And the next thing you know, you're at the top. But you've got to wait. Wait. You got to hold that rope and just wait until you actually like, you get that purchase, and then it'll send you up the hill, right? And then that's good for me. I think also, though, at the same time, the phase of all of it that I like the least, the thing that like I don't quit, but I'm buckling under the pressure of like not having either a users, like, so being in stealth is a very like anxious period for me, because I need the validation of seeing people use the thing I built to know that to make it as good as it can be, but also to know that what I built is not like, insane. Like I'm not just building something for no one. I need to perform. Like I need to have an audience. I think I do my best work with an audience. And so operating in stealth, like I'm realizing that minimizing the period when I'm in stealth is it's probably best for me, like my mental health, but also just like my performance. And yeah, and then also like being like being live but not having product market fit, being like, pre-revenue, I think is also like another anxious period, because then once you have users, it's like, okay, well, but they're not paying. How do I get them to pay now? And then that becomes like the next thing that I want to unlock. And I think once I'm getting $1 or 10 or 1,000 or whatever, like once there's some trickle of water through the pipes, and I'm like, okay, now this becomes more of a scaling exercise, and like that is more comfortable. But then the rest of it, that I think I take it. It can be like I beat myself up a lot. Like if I ever say unkind things to myself, it's when we're in stealth or when we don't have like $1 trickling through the system yet. That's when I'm maybe like the hardest on myself. And then I think that's maybe when when if I was just more chill about that phase, I'd probably enjoy it more. But I make it more stressful than it needs to be, because I think it's just that's just in my nature for some reason.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wanted to, there was something while we're talking about risk, and something I think, Adam, you said way early on about sort of insulating people. And one of the things that I think is interesting for startups is, like, as you start hiring people and you have more people there, obviously people join startups, they're probably a little more risk taking or whatever. That's sort of this notion. I'm curious how you balance how much you insulate and create that, like, that zone of safety for people versus how transparent you are. Because to me, I'm all about transparency. I came to a startup. I know the risks. I know that, like, if we're not making money, like, things can happen, and like, just share it with me and I'll handle it much better than you trying to insulate me from it too much. And then it's a big surprise. So I'm curious, like, as a founder, how do you balance that? And Ryan, I'm also curious for your opinion about, starting with Adam, like, how do you sort of balance that transparency versus insulation?
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's a really interesting sort of spectrum, right? Like, do you want to be radically transparent, or do you want to maybe curate that impression a little more? And I think lately I'm leaning more towards the more transparent part, but we still, yeah, like there is a lot of, there are some, how do I say it? I mean, it takes like maybe a certain amount of intestinal fortitude to like acknowledge and deal with those certain realities. And so, when I was a developer and I didn't have to think about those things, like I was a developer in the 2008 financial crisis, right? I wasn't a founder then. And, the founders would communicate that, yes, the company is in like healthy balance sheet, don't worry, but it's also like there's volatility out there, and like we don't know exactly, so like we're okay, but the macro is not, so we got to be mindful, but at the same time, don't be skittish, like your job is secure, but we all need to be resourceful. And so there's kind of like, they could have said things that were scary, and I might have freaked out, and who knows, maybe I would have sought out maybe a bigger company than a startup, thinking I don't want to miss, like rent.
I mean, I was going to say the same thing effectively, is that I don't think that there's a cut and dry way to say what's right here. I think it's about using your best judgment as a leader. It's there, like, take a fundraising cycle. You can go through, a lot of roller coaster emotions of, like, you had a bad meeting and it really like crushed you, and and you're not sure what's going to happen next. And then you have a really great meeting and that brings you back up. And that, like, very tight feedback loop of emotions is not helpful information to be giving to, like, the rest of the team, right? And so I think in any given situation, you just need to, like, does the cost outweigh the benefits, of bringing people along for this? And I feel like my co-founder Emily and I are making micro decisions on this level about transparency daily. Like, and just every little thing we discuss and talk about. And we actually do have like you said, Adam, we have a general policy of transparency and openness with our team, but we also, it depends, is the shortest way to say that. Tim, I've got one thing to jump back to before we wrap, on something Adam
Yeah.
said, just because I feel pretty strongly about this area. So Adam was talking about the no, like, the thin skin for quitting, right? Like, taking it down to the ground, like literally crashing the plane into the earth. And I think on the surface, I completely agree with you. Like I was in Y Combinator for Paul Graham's last batch, and one thing he said to us really stuck with me, which is like the thing that separates successful companies from unsuccessful companies is the founders of the successful companies did not quit. There's literally nothing else that separates them. And that really stuck with me, and I actually believe it. I think you could actually just keep doing a thing for long enough, no matter what it is, to figure it out and be successful. But the other thing you said about mental health, and I think this is particularly clear to us as multi-time founders, is that there are versions of that story that are terrible for you and terrible objectively. And there are versions of that story that are not terrible. They are better aligned with what you care about, or they're better aligned with who you're working with. And so I think in those situations, even if you could go and succeed by toughing it out, like I believe that there's the next one that you can't. And so it's okay to quit. That's just my perspective, obviously.
I actually very much agree with that. As Adam's talking, I think
Yeah.
it was interesting. I know we want to move on, but I thought it was great the way you put it, Adam, of for better or for worse, or for, whatever, because growing up,
blessing and a curse.
Yeah, blessing and a curse, right? Because growing up, Cool Hand Luke was my role model, which I don't know if you know that movie, but it's just about a guy who just does not quit. Spoiler, it doesn't end well for him. So and so it's something that like has been throughout my career of like, and as I got older, I was like, I've gotten much better at recognizing like this is a toxic environment. Like why, like even if I stuck it out, what am I winning? Like all I'm winning is like paying my therapist more. So, or whatever it is. And so I do agree. Like there is that like grit, that like fortitude that I will not quit. But I think balancing it out and making sure, it's a healthy environment or whatever it is an important part. There's definitely some situations I stayed in way longer than I should have earlier in my career. Right. That's a follow-up episode, I think.
Yeah. Yep. I think what it comes down to as well is like having that level of awareness. Like if you don't have that level of awareness of when to quit, then you're just going to keep running on that hamster wheel thinking that you can fix it, and it'll just burn you out, and nobody will benefit from having founders that are just burn out and can't be effective leaders. So yeah, I mean, we could riff on this for another hour. And this is probably one of the longest going that we've had, but that's a good sign. I mean, I think people are just, we're enjoying the discussion, but I do want to make the pivot. We'll close here with this final segment here called the 5-second scramble. I'm going to ask each of you just a series of questions. Try to keep it, within 5 seconds if you can. You won't get this if you go over 5 seconds. So don't worry about the air horn. I'm going to go ahead and start with Ryan. Explain archive to me as if I was a 5-year-old.
You can buy used things online from any brand that, well, I don't know if 5-year-olds know what brands are, but what's a 5-year-old brand? Some toy.
Okay.
Legos. You could go buy Legos that other kids used to play with, and it's a lot cheaper.
That's good. How would you describe your culture?
Really fun and weird, and everyone's super smart and really respects each other. And that's really hard to do remote. And I think getting in person as a group at least twice a year helps immensely with that.
What kind of technologist thrives at Archive?
A product, like a product forward engineer or product. We actually have a very small product team with one product manager for 13 engineers. And It's because every one of our engineers is a product thinker and really thinks about what am I building and why. I think that's what draws them to the startup in the first place, but definitely that.
What can folks be most excited about for Archive in 2023?
We have some really exciting big kind of enterprise grade brand launches coming up. I can't mention the brand names, but that's going to be really exciting because there will be lots of products you'll be able to buy used online that you can't really today, directly from the brand. So they're refurbished and everything. So that's pretty exciting. And we will be launching in-store kind of capability so that brands can actually sell these products in their stores as well as online. So, yeah.
Cool. What's one of your favorite books or podcast on leadership?
So I listened to How I Built This like religiously. I've listened to probably over 100 episodes of that. I find that the stories are super inspirational, and I really like listening to ones about like very far from my domain, so like not software. Just because there's such interesting stories. My favorite episode is the Tate's Bake Shop episode. If for anyone who also listens to that,
Huge fan, and you can't not mention it, Guy Raz's voice, like Guy Raz.
I know.
Yeah, there was another one. I think it was like pita chips, Rita's pita chips or something.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I fall into that, like very outside of like what I'm doing, but it's very interesting stories.
Totally.
What do you love most about yourself?
Whoa. I don't know. I think I actually got asked this recently, and I would say my creativity. Like I'm not an artist. I used to play drums, so I can sort of consider myself a musician. I get my creativity out often through code and through the products that I build, but I really like to think of myself, and I think I am a really creative person, and I like that.
If you were in a food eating contest, what kind of food would you be eating?
God. I mean, I would probably choose some form of burger just because I feel like I could just keep or like French fries. I could eat those forever, but those probably aren't good choices.
That's okay.
It's probably something that's like more optimizes how much you could eat without getting sick, and that is not it. So
Yeah, cheeseburger sliders do sound good though.
yeah.
What's the worst fashion trend you've ever followed?
Whoa, that is a tough one. I don't know. I feel like there was a bunch of stuff that went down in the 90s, maybe tie-dye or slap bracelets, if you consider that a fashion trend.
For sure. What's a charity or corporate philanthropy that's near and dear to you?
That's a good question. I mean, I always tend to do climate related things. I don't have a particular one in mind, but that's sort of the problem space that's most near and dear to my heart. And so, obviously I choose to spend my time working on archive for that reason, but often charities that like my Amazon Smile is something along those lines.
Nice. And we'll end with who is your favorite superhero?
I don't really like superheroes.
Favorite Disney character?
Nemo.
No, nice.
I'll go Nemo.
That's a good answer. That is a great answer. Talk about persistent. All right, that's good. That is a wrap on your end. So, Adam, you're up. You ready? We'll be gentle. Explain Peggy to me as if I was a 5-year-old.
Yeah. So Peggy is a place where you can meet other artists like yourself, and you can purchase their art. And if you grow up and you no longer like unicorns and you prefer robots, you can then rehome that painting to someone who loves unicorns and buy 2 paintings of robots.
Perfect. What's your favorite part about the culture at Peggy?
My favorite part about the culture at Peggy is the intersection between art and technology. And people who thrive here are ones who have always wanted to work, in art in some capacity while bridging their love for tech and business. And so for those folks, this is like the dream job.
What kind of technologist thrives at Peggy?
A technologist who leans into challenging and undefined problems, because we try and give folks autonomy to come up with the best, may the best solution win. And so folks who thrive on that and who take great pride in the craftsmanship of software generally have a good time here.
And then what can folks be excited about for Peggy in 2023?
We are currently uploading a ton of really cool artwork, and so sure, I'm the founder, but as a user, every time I go into the app and I'm refreshing the home screen, I'm just seeing new stuff, and it's just getting better and better. Lots of more diverse art in terms of just different styles and subject matters, but lots of really cool things. So even for me as a founder, it's always a delight to open the app and see what's new.
What is your favorite cereal?
Raisin Bran. It's sort of, yeah. Is that like a more technical, functional cereal? I mean, it's like, the brand is pretty, functional, but the raisins give you that hit of sweetness. So, but the only thing is, never buy your Raisin Bran from Costco because I think they use inferior quality flakes. They're always crushed. So, you know, avoid the Costco quantity and just get the nice, wholesome, unbroken flakes. It makes all the difference in your daily ritual.
This episode's brought to us by Costco. I think we're getting that.
Yeah, Costco's a big sponsor here. That is a pro tip, though. What's a big role model in your life? Who's a big role model in your life?
I think, not a lame answer, but I think my parents, because it was my mother that taught me sort of my soft edge and how to be kind and optimistic, and also my father really like pushed me and challenged me and sort of taught me the hustle and to have grit and perseverance. And so I think those two forces have really served me well, I think, as an entrepreneur.
If you could live in a fictional world from a book or a movie, which one would you choose?
I'm a bit of an anime nerd, and so the Naruto world would be pretty inspiring because it's got sort of a blend of ninjutsu and magic and technology in this sort of like fun feudal era. So, and then yeah, good times ensue. So I don't think I would be bored in that world, and there's a lot of like complementary skill sets and characters that would keep me entertained.
Nice. What do you have a celebrity doppelganger?
When I was a kid, everyone thought that I looked a lot like the nerdy kid from The Sandlot, and maybe that was a form of like mild bullying.
I mean, every character in The Sandlot's awesome.
Yeah,
so
but anyway,
I take that as a compliment.
that one comes to mind as a kid, and
yeah, but he lands Winnie Peppercorn. It totally does. Do you have any phobias or irrational fears?
I have an irrational fear of mist. I really dislike getting, like going out in misty rain and having mist on my glasses and just getting my face like pulverized with mist. For some reason, it just infuriates me, even though it's like such a, innocuous thing to be upset about.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
I would love to have sort of instant recollection of everything that I'd ever learned before. Kind of like Neo being able to download and inject the tapes, but I don't need that instant sort of download of information, but rather just the flawless recollection of every detail that I've amassed from whatever. Like, because think of all the things that you've learned and forgotten. Like, I would Bash would probably be my go-to like scripting language, for example. Like, like think of how many Bash commands you've forgotten, like you've learned and then forgotten, learned in the past like 20, 30 years, right? So anyway, yeah, that's probably that would be a very useful skill. And also, I have the memory of a goldfish, and I'm constantly forgetting to bring up the laundry or, buy the milk, and it would probably also improve my marital life too.
Nice. And then I'll end with Ryan's original. Do you have a favorite superhero?
I'm not a huge superhero guy. My wife is huge into like Harry Potter, Marvel, all those wonderful series. I'm usually just playing with a laptop and hacking when those shows are on. However, for some reason, I found myself like attracted to Ant-Man, and so I don't know. I love the Ant-Man shows, and the more Ant-Man I'm exposed to, the better it is. I just think it's amazing. Otherwise, like Deadpool is great too. But I was like, pretty enamored by Ant-Man, so I'm gonna go with
Ant-Man. All right, we're going with final answer, Ant-Man. Cool. That's it, guys. That is a wrap. Thank you both so much for spending time with us and kind of diving into this topic. I know it's a fascinating one. I'm sure we'll get a lot of interest in it. And so I appreciate you all spending time with us here on the Pair program.